Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I finally would give my little fight prediction on the very big fight and the very decent fight that will be happening, I believe, this weekend. I believe the date will be June 4th, this Saturday. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. Anyways, the fight and the unification fight that, of course, I am talking about that will be happening this weekend is that of the George Kambosos versus Devin Haney fight. And I think that this is a very particularly interesting fight. Of course, these are the only two remaining champions within that weight division. Devin Haney now has had the WBC championship, I believe, for either a little over a year, maybe about 2 years, somewhere around there. And George Kambosos, of course, last year with the upset victory over Teofimo Lopez, he, of course, has the rest of the belts within that weight division. So whoever does win this fight will be the complete unified champion of the world at 135 pounds at the lightweight division, which is a very decently talented division. And whoever is the winner of this fight, in my view, very well could debatably be on the top 10 pound for pound list, at least in my view. And some people may say, well, debatably, why wouldn't they for sure be on there? Well, the reason why is because the pound for pound list, in my view, lately is just so competitive. There's just so many spots moving. On my top five, like I've said many, many times, I have Errol Spence there, Terrence Crawford, in no particular order, by the way. Errol Spence, Terrence Crawford, Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury, Canelo Alvarez is still there, even though with his last loss, Dimitri Bivol now has to be entered into the list because of his victory over that of Canelo Alvarez. Josh Taylor still has to be there. Naoya Inoue, in my view, probably would still have to be there, but I do need to see him face better competition. And then, of course, that leaves us with Jermell Charlo, Shakur Stevenson, and then possibly some other candidates as well. So the pound for pound list right now, in my view, is probably as competitive as what it has ever been. But this is going to be a very particularly interesting fight, and I'm going to give you my fight breakdown, my fight prediction of who I believe is going to win the fight and why. Do I think that it will go to decision? Do I think that there will be a stoppage? What is going to happen? Well, let's get straight into it. Anyways, if you are asking me for my prediction about who I believe is going to win this fight, I'll just give you a straightforward answer. I do believe that, in my view, that Devin Haney will be the victor in this fight, and a certain amount of people may not agree with me. I remember commenting on a couple of Facebook polls not too long ago, and I said that, even though I think George Kambosos actually is a decent fighter, I just don't think that he would beat Devin Haney. And I had certain people come, basically comment, or reply to my answer, and they said, oh, well, George Kambosos, people said the same thing with Teofimo Lopez. He'll do it again, and this and this and this. Yes, but for those of us that are experienced enough about boxing, and for those of us that are intelligent enough, we all know that styles make fights. And did George Kambosos really beat Teofimo Lopez because he overall is just a pure A-grade pedigree fighter? Or did he beat Teofimo Lopez not only because they were somewhat mirrors of each other in terms of style, but also because I think that Teofimo Lopez somewhat underestimated him? That is, in my view, why George Kambosos won the fight, or at least that it was a mix of things. I think that that Teofimo Lopez put up a lousy fight. I thought that he somewhat underestimated that of a George Kambosos. And I think that if Teofimo Lopez, at least in my view, that if he would have put up overall, somewhat, or if he would have took him more seriously, I believe that he probably would have put on a better performance. And I think that George Kambosos' skills, and I believe all in all that his power, also caught Teofimo Lopez a little bit off guard in that fight. I don't think that he thought George Kambosos was going to be that good. I think he thought that he was going to knock him out probably within about 7 rounds maximum. And it turned out that, once he realized that this dude actually was for real, at least to a certain degree, that he was having a very, very big issue. The question is about Mr. George Kambosos is this guy for real? Could he potentially take over the 135-pound division? Is he actually, quote unquote, the emperor, as he so claims? Or is he going to be another Jermaine Taylor? Is he going to be another Buster Douglas? Is he going to be another Andy Ruiz, where he ended up winning that one big fight, but then the next fight right after that, once he started facing some of the other top contenders, he kind of ended up getting exposed for what he was, which is a fighter that, all in all, ended up, giving a very troubling time to the elite champion, but then all in all ended up losing because overall some of his flaws were exposed. Devin Haney and George Kambosos, in my view, I think that this is a fight that could potentially go either way. But I am going to have to favor Devin Haney here, probably about 70-30. And the reason why that is, maybe 60-40 if I wanted to do that. But the reason why I'm doing that is because I just believe that Devin Haney is out of the smarter fighter. I believe that he will have that of the better tactical advantage. I believe that he more than likely will have the better game plan. I think the way that George Kambosos fights, I don't think that it is necessarily the right type of style to defeat that of a Devin Haney. Because I think that both of these fighters, just like when I seen George Kambosos up against Teofimo Lopez, they fight very, very similarly. Devin Haney and George Kambosos, they are not necessarily pressure fighters. They're fighters that prefer to be on the back foot. They like to counterpunch you. They like to be on the back foot and circle around you. Do I believe that if George Kambosos fights like that against that of a Devin Haney, that he will win this fight? Absolutely not. No, I do not. Now, this fight is in Australia, so who knows? Maybe there could be some home cooking. Maybe there could be some, home soil advantage. I also did see that Devin Haney is not going to have his father there, who I believe is his main trainer. If that's not his main trainer, then, maybe he's just a cornerman. I'm not necessarily sure, but Devin Haney, at the end of the day, in my view, still overall will have that of the advantage. Why do I think all in all that he will have that of the tactical advantage? Because when I see George Kambosos fight, even in the Teofimo Lopez fight, I still saw several faults in that fight to where I believe Devin Haney is going to be smart enough and not underestimate him. Teofimo Lopez, unfortunately for himself, he underestimated George Kambosos. Maybe if it would have been Devin Haney in the last fight that underestimated George Kambosos, maybe George Kambosos would have beat Devin Haney. But that's not how it ended up happening. Now, Devin Haney has the luxury of seeing overall how good George Kambosos is, especially when somewhat underestimates him. So Devin Haney is going to take him 100% seriously, and I believe that he is going to do whatever he needs to do that is necessary in order to pretty much outpoint that of a George Kambosos. One of the flaws, in my view, that George Kambosos has is the fact that he does not like to keep his hands up a whole lot. And I don't know, and I noticed that in the Teofimo Lopez fight. He is very decently quick. He has very fast hands. He has decent power as well. But I don't think it's going to work against Devin Haney because, at least from what I've seen, Devin Haney is the lengthier fighter. He is also very decently quick. Now, Devin Haney doesn't necessarily have, one-shot knockout power, but he can hurt you if he hits you enough times. If there was a stoppage in this fight by either gentleman in the fight, would I be necessarily shell-shocked? No, I would not be. But the reason why I believe that Devin Haney more than likely is going to win by decision is because I just think that George Kambosos more than likely, I think he's going to do a lot of what Oscar Valdez did in that of the Shakur Stevenson fight. And I said that in the Shakur Stevenson fight with Oscar Valdez, what he was going to have to do in that fight is that he was going to have to make it a very gritty, very dirty, very rough fight. And when I say dirty, I'm just talking about dirty boxing. I'm not talking about low blowing or elbowing or anything like that. So I'm not talking about actual, illegal tactics. I'm just talking about rough, dirty boxing, kind of like what Tyson Fury did with Deontay Wilder in those rematches. Lay your weight on him, whatever. But, overall, when it comes down to it, Oscar Valdez, the reason why he lost that fight with Shakur Stevenson, all in all, is because he tried to pick his shots with the superior boxer and not the bigger boxer. And you can't do that. If you're in the ring, all in all, with someone that is bigger than you, someone all in all that is very decently slick, and if you're trying to pick shots with them, 99% of the time that is not going to work. And if George Kambosos, in my view, believes that he is going to beat Devin Haney by out-countering him, in my opinion, that is not going to work. Don't get me wrong. You can use your counter punches to the best of your ability. He's a very good counter puncher. But in my view, he is going to have to charge Devin Haney in this fight. He is going to have to pressure him the majority of the time. And if he does not do that in this fight, he will lose this fight. Devin Haney is bigger than him. He is lengthier than him when it comes down to it. And I believe that Devin Haney will circle around George Kambosos the majority of the night and probably get the better punches in. Now, neither of these guys, in my view, necessarily have a great defense. Devin Haney in his last fight against Jojo Diaz, I thought that Devin Haney clearly won the fight. I believe about 8 rounds to 4. I believe that's what I scored it. But Jojo Diaz, I did notice he was getting certain successes in there because he kept his hands up a lot of the time. He got in there, and although he was able to land certain hooks, he actually was able to hurt Devin Haney quite a few times from what I remember in that fight. And Jojo Diaz is not remembered as a person that necessarily has a great power. But the reason why Devin Haney was having so many problems with that guy is because he was keeping his hands up, he was getting inside the range, and he was someone exposing some of the faults that Devin Haney has defensively. Do I think that George Kambosos is going to be able to do that? He might be able to hit him here and there, but I just think that George Kambosos has the wrong style to try and beat Devin Haney. What would be my advice to George Kambosos to beat that of a Devin Haney? Keep your hands up, utilize that jab, try to hit him overall with that right hand, get inside, go to the body, hit him with hooks if you have him inside on the range. That would be my advice, but even though I think George Kambosos somewhat will try certain things like that, I don't think all in all that he really is going to have the right strategy approach. I think that George Kambosos actually has the potential, if he were to play things right, to beat that of a Devin Haney. Do I think he's going to do it? No, I do not. It just is what it is. Devin Haney, in my view, I think that he's going to be the quicker. I think that he's going to be the smarter fighter. I think that he is going to be on the back foot. And I think all in all that these guys are going to be somewhat mirrors of each other. And I think that both fighters are going to try to outcounter the other one. And George Kambosos, even though he has very decent power, I believe that he certainly has more power than that of a Devin Haney. It's not enough, in my view, to just knock out Devin Haney with just one shot. So more than likely, Devin Haney, in my view, he is going to be on the back foot. George Kambosos, he's going to try to probably outbox him in the middle of the ring. I think it's going to be a very, very grave mistake. But we'll see. I'll know what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe George Kambosos will adjust better in this fight. But from what I've noticed, even though for how talented of a fighter George Kambosos can be, he does not like to keep his hands up. He likes to box you in the middle of the ring. All right, he is not an A-grade defensive fighter. He is a person that, in my view, you really can debate whether he's an A-grade fighter or not. I would say that he's an A-minus fighter. So whoever does win this fight, they will deserve the vast amount of credit. But I believe that Devin Haney will be the victor. If I were going to give any strategy or advice to Devin Haney, be on that back foot, keep that right hand up when it comes down to it. Utilize that jab. You seem to be that of the lengthier fighter. Go to the body, tie him up when you need to. Watch out for hooks, watch out for that overhand right. Move around and utilize your distance, utilize your reach. Because George Kambosos more than likely is going to try to out-counter you. He more than likely, all in all, is going to try to box you in the middle of the ring. Use that to your advantage. Because I believe that Devin Haney, that he's the lengthier and that he is a slightly bigger fighter, which I believe is going to give him I believe is going to give him the advantage in that category. Now, some people may say, well, we've seen certain boxers overall outbox fighters that are bigger than themselves, like that of a Canelo Alvarez. How do you know that George Kambosos is not going to do that? Because I don't think George Kambosos is anywhere near close to what a Canelo Alvarez is when I've seen him at his best. I don't think that George Kambosos is that level of fighter at all. In my opinion, George Kambosos, he pretty much is another Jermaine Taylor or another Andrew Ruiz, a person that got a very, very big break off of a fighter that more than likely underestimated them or just had a very, very big problem with that type of style. And then he fought another elite champion, like when Buster Douglas fought Evander Holyfield, and then basically he ended up getting showed for what he truly was, which was a person, all in all, that got one lucky big break. But it is what it is. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I hope for George Kambosos' sake that I'm wrong. I hope, all in all, that, maybe he at least gives it a very competitive run. But I believe that Devin Haney is going to win this fight by unanimous decision. I'm going to go about 8 rounds to 4. Could be 9 rounds to 3 as well. I just think that George Kambosos, even though both of these fighters somewhat mimic each other with their styles, I believe that Devin Haney is a better and smarter version of what George Kambosos is. And that's the reason why I'm going with Devin Haney in this fight. But we shall see what happens. That is really about it for this fight prediction. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.